We really do want a place that, I mean, quite frankly, the word that comes up most often, and this is not just from Vibrant Englewood, this is what, we see in city surveys and other things, is walkable. People want that area to be a walkable downtown. And right now, everything is so separated by parking lots that, it's walkable in the sense of you could physically walk from one place to another, but you wouldn't want to. We want an area that provides the kind of amenities that, serve the community. We want new housing, ideally both for sale housing and rental housing, would definitely a great aspect to have there. We want, smaller local businesses as opposed to big box stores. And most importantly, we want things built on a human scale. We want things built so that, the people who live here can move between these places without having to get in their car.
Welcome back to Cities in Motion. I'm Jacob. This is the podcast for anyone who wants cities built for people. Each week, we dig into the systems, design, and culture that shape urban life and explore how smarter transportation, better planning, and thoughtful policy can make our communities more livable. Noah, thank you so much for showing up on Cities in Motion. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us all about Vibrant Englewood?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. Really excited. I don't know if I'm your first non-Texas guest, but no, you had at least one from Oklahoma. First Colorado. Okay. So thanks so much for having me. Love the podcast and love what you're doing. Noah Kaplan. I am the founder of an organization called Vibrant Englewood. We're a grassroots community advocacy organization in Englewood, Colorado. So Englewood is an inner ring suburb that sits just to the southwest of Denver. We are a city of about 35,000 people. And I started this organization in 2024, essentially with the goal of advocating for, a kind of more urbanist view of Englewood and policies and decisions that will reflect that in our city. So the key issues that we focus on are affordable and abundant housing, safe and accessible transportation, thriving, strong public schools, and a diverse and inclusive community. And we've got now a good, group of folks connected in and have been active in the city for, about a year and a half now.
I was looking up your focus areas like you brought up earlier on your website. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on each of these, like safe, accessible transportation options?
Sure. So I think the important thing to understand about Englewood and kind of where we sit in the Denver metro is that Englewood is a landlocked city. We are only 6 square miles, at about 35,000 people. So, we are a city that, in my view, could be the sort of quintessential 15-minute city. I work from home now. My kids go to Englewood schools, and I can tell you that the reality is I can do a lot of what I need to do and what I want to do in my life within the city limits of Englewood. And that means I'm only going a few miles, one way, or another to do things around the city. And so we want to make sure that people can both have choices for what kind of transportation they want to use to get around the city, whether it's, walking, biking, rolling, transit, but then also we know that the reality is that there's a lot of people who don't have choices. There's a lot of people who are using various modes besides individual cars for transportation, not because they choose it, but because they have to, because cars are extremely expensive. And we want to make sure that we're also creating a city where those folks can get around as well. And so, like I said, as a small landlocked city, we want to make sure that we're thinking about those connections and that we're not purely designing our transportation systems around people that are driving through, but we're actually designing our transportation systems for the people that live here, the people that work here, the people that shop here. And so we can have a city that serves our community and not just, the broader Denver metro and folks that are passing through.
Within Englewood, are there any sort of micro mobility options, or does the Denver transportation extend outside into those suburbs?
Yeah, so in the Denver metro, we're served by the Regional Transportation District (RTD), which serves the broader Denver metro community. So we are served by some key bus routes that pass through Englewood, both north south and east west. And then we also have the southwest line of our light rail system that is essentially right next to our city hall and our city center. And that is great for getting downtown.
Yeah.
Uh, but the reality of the world we live in now is that a lot fewer people are trying to get downtown on a regular basis. And so that sort of fixed route light rail system has struggled in the last few years. Uh, and so we're really interested in what RTD is going to do around frequency of buses, frequency of the train as well, but primarily around those key bus routes, and making sure that folks can get to any part of the city, using transit. We don't have, for example, the e-scooters, e-bikes, things like that are not currently permitted. And I mean, they are for individuals, but
Yeah.
we don't have a Lyft or Lime, sort of contract here in the city. I'm interested to see Denver is moving to VIO for their micromobility contract. And so I'm interested to see how that goes and potentially look at whether that's something that Englewood would want to do, because I do think it'd be a great service for us to have here. But primarily, like I said, being such a small city, it's a great place most of the time to walk, to bike, and I want to make sure that we have the infrastructure and the feeling of safety that encourages more people to get out and do those things.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like where I'm living right now. I live just south of Austin, a giant city similar to Denver. Well, not similar, but the capital city of our state. And it's much smaller. We're about 15,000 right now. But there's plenty of sidewalks everywhere. There's paths, there's parks, and I'm less than a mile from the grocery store, but sometimes it is a little bit unsafe to get there. And on one of my most recent Instagram posts, I just was really frustrated with this street to get to our grocery store, and I just redesigned it to make it more accessible for bikes and slow down speeds. And I think a lot of cities like ours are in the same situation. It's small, it's accessible, but there's still some things that need to be worked on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting about the context in Englewood is that we're very old. I think when you think about the suburban context, you're often thinking about sort of recent development and continued sprawl. But the city of Englewood dates back to before the Civil War, and we had a horse pulled trolley down Broadway, our main thoroughfare, before 1900. So we're not a city that developed around the car. We're a city that redeveloped to make the car primary later in our history. And I think what we're dealing with now is how to swing that pendulum back the other way. We've seen these cycles of, we had an urban renewal authority here 20, 30 years ago. And, they viewed urban renewal as making the city a place for big box stores and cars and parking lots. And that was, the direction that people saw the future going at that point. And I think we're digging out from that. But I do think it means that we do have this history to tap into, and we do have this ability to point to, this is what Englewood was, and this is what Englewood could be again. And I think that having that history and that culture to tap into is really valuable.
Let's talk about affordable and buried housing options. One of your main tenants. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's really important to, in the housing conversation, to always recognize that, one, housing is a regional issue, a national issue, And a little place like Englewood is only going to be able to do so much when it comes to housing affordability. And then the other thing is that, there's a difference between, capital A affordable housing and, abundant available housing at various price points that serve different people. And I think, so we try to make sure that we are focused on the gamut of what sort of affordable and available housing can be. Englewood did a lot a few years ago through a project that was called Code Next, which was basically a rewrite of our zoning code, which really did unlock a lot of opportunities for some incremental development through things like ADUs. And we're still kind of tweaking some things that have been ongoing barriers to those, actually being developed. But, I think the city leadership's heart is in the right place, and we're trying to continue to move in that direction. I think, we have a lot of the development over the last, 10 to 20 years. And this is a problem across Colorado is that you have single family homes and you have, apartments for rent and not a whole lot in the middle, right? That classic missing middle housing problem. It's particularly acute in Colorado because of some legal complications around sort of liability for builders. And it's been an ongoing issue here that the legislature has, talks about every year, but hasn't solved. So we really want to, just sort of, weigh in. There's a lot of fear mongering that you hear about, that we hear anyway, about, the sewer systems and the infrastructure and the traffic. And, I think we want to be a voice to make sure it's clear that the city knows about those things and the city is thinking about those things. And if, you know, a new development is approved, it's because they've looked at the capacity that we have to handle that development. And, just because somebody comes to a public meeting and says something on the microphone doesn't make it a fact about the development that's going in. So we want to be a voice on the other side, saying that we're happy to have new neighbors. We're happy to have the opportunity to continue to add density. The reality is Englewood's growth population wise has been very slow over the last 50 years. And the only way for a city like ours to grow is by adding density because we can't grow out. And so, to keep our local businesses strong, to keep our schools strong, continuing to increment our density and add population is critical. So we want to be a voice for that. And we recognize that part of that challenge is, having different types of housing so that we can hit different price points, so that we can, have we can be a place where, teachers can live, nurses can live, as well as, professional, class folks, as well as working class folks. We want to have options for everybody.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think people should definitely be able to afford where they work, and that'll definitely remove the hour-long commute or the stress of affordability. What is Vibrant Englewood's stance on strong public education?
Yeah. So one sort of historical piece of context is we have kind of a sister organization called Vibrant Littleton. Littleton is the next suburb to the south of us here. And their group started up a few years before us. And I did a lot before I launched Vibrant Englewood to study what they were doing and kind of look at their set of issues and activities and really try to replicate that. One of the things that happened kind of organically when the organization launched and people started coming in and bringing their own interests and issues to the table was this focus on public education. It's not something that Vibrant Littleton has as part of their kind of issue set, but the folks who, came to the sort of initial meetings for Vibrant Englewood said this is something that we in Englewood need to be focused on, and so we've added that to our issue set. The way that the school systems work here is that the school district is a separate entity from the city with an elected school board and completely separate in that way. But geographically, our Englewood school district and the city of Englewood are almost 100% overlapping. So, we have those, we have neighborhood schools, that really, serve our community. But we also have lots of folks who choice out and go to Denver schools or go to Littleton schools or go to various charter school options. And we also have a number of folks who choice in, which is great. We're always happy to have anyone who chooses to go to Englewood schools. That's fantastic. And so we have kind of made it part of our mission to work closely with the school district to talk about the great things that our schools are doing. We have one of the only 5-star rated public preschool programs in the state that's run by our school district. Both of my kids went to it. It's fantastic. It's an amazing resource for our city. We have, schools. We have elementary schools that are building, strong culture within their neighborhood and really serving as that neighborhood hub. Uh, and then one of the challenges that the school district faces is sort of maintaining students from that preschool and elementary level through the middle and high school. And so we're trying to identify how we can, you know, push the school district to do the things they need to do better. And also, kind of make the schools a part of our sort of sales pitch for what we love about Englewood and what we think the great things are that we have access to here, and really support the continued, strength and development of our public school system.
Yeah, the first thing I think of is bike buses, and I see those. There are a few here in Austin. Do you have any in the area?
Uh, we don't have any, as far as I know, regular bike buses in the area.
Okay.
I have, so my son bikes to school every day. It's like a half mile down the street. It's wonderful that he has that freedom and that independence. He's in 4th grade now, but he's been doing that for years. When he went to that preschool that I was mentioning before, first I was biking him there with him in a bike trailer. And then even before he got out of preschool, he was riding his own bike along with me to go to preschool. And then, he's graduated now to being able to ride to school on its own. So we do have, the ability to do that in our communities, which is wonderful. Our elementary schools, some of them do really great work around bike and walk to school day, and run some sort of one-time bike buses on that day to kind of, connect people to the school who maybe aren't riding or walking on a regular basis. And those can be really great events to kind of show people the possibility of that kind of transportation to school. We've had some talks with folks who are interested in potentially getting more regular bike buses, but it's not something that we have the ability to do right now.
Yeah.
But those conversations are ongoing, and I fully agree with you that it's a wonderful program, and really creates a great opportunity to get kids comfortable biking on a regular basis, biking on the streets in a way that is safe, in a way that is fun, and really, connects kids with active transportation in a way that can really improve their lives going forward. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it, and I really hope we get there.
They definitely built that independence, that confidence in their ability to get themselves to school, and of course, the parents don't have to drudge through the pickup and drop off lines, and that really frees up the congestion of those schools and makes everything a lot quicker. Have you heard of you, critical mass? Do you have critical mass in the area?
Uh, yeah. So, I mean, being in the more suburban context,
Yeah.
uh, I think, critical mass isn't something that we're, that we see sort of in regularly. I'm sure they've been done in
Yeah.
Denver, but, not in our context. I actually have recently been introduced to critical mass,
Bring
which
that up.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, very similar to, maybe I heard about it on your podcast. That is very likely. And so definitely looking at that, potentially looking at collaborating with some folks from Vibrant Littleton, and maybe trying to, do something like that for more social rides with kids that aren't just the bike bus model. But yeah, I think, any way we can get kids on bikes, I'm for.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that we as Vibrant Englewood want to support.
Why is it important that Englewood is welcoming and inclusive to people who moved, people who've been there for decades?
I think, a place like Englewood, we have one way that people divide themselves, unfortunately, is around how long they've lived here. And we are sometimes faced with, people who come to the table to talk about, issues in our community. And sometimes they come with the attitude that how long they've lived in the community or how long their family has lived in the community uh, should mean that their opinion on the future of our community matters more than other people. And that's not the way we view things. We think it's great that, we have, new people who move into the city. I've been here 11 years now, but there's, folks within Vibrant Englewood that are, people who have been here for a couple of generations and just a couple years or even a couple months, here in the city, and they find us and get connected and get involved. And we love that. I think one of the really interesting and unique things about Englewood is its diversity. And I mean that in the broadest sense, includes, racial diversity, but also, a diversity of incomes, diversity of, religious practices, all kinds, right? And I think that, that's something that we really value a lot and want to make sure that as a city we're supporting. I think we've seen really good responses from some of our officials to some of the issues with ICE, the issues with, surveillance cameras and law enforcement, and some things like that that are sort of front of mind for a lot of our community members right now. And, we want to make sure that we are giving our elected officials and city staff, kudos when they're doing things that make it more comfortable and more welcoming to live here, and that we're pushing them to keep doing more to make it a place that people want to come, want to live, want to stay, and and so we just think that's a better place to live.
I definitely agree with you that it sounds like y'all are doing y'all, sorry, that's a Texas coming out of me. It sounds like you guys are doing
I mean, Jacob, I'm a Texan as well. Hook 'em horns.
Oh, cool, right.
I yeah, grew up in Houston, went to UT Austin. I've been gone a long time, but yeah, you don't need to worry about dropping a few y'alls with me.
It's funny because I grew up in Central Texas and didn't say howdy. I maybe said y'all a few times, but then I went off to college up in West Texas and I came back saying howdy, howdy, howdy. Not even I said it ironically at first, but now I say howdy. It's
I mean, I went to UT Austin, and
yeah,
I still say howdy quite a bit.
okay,
So
cool. You've had this may be a little bit out of date, but I was looking at your website, the redevelopment going on in your downtown. Tell me about that.
yeah, so I talked a little bit about Englewood's history, and I think it's really, you can kind of see it just in that one area, which is what we call our city center. So, decades ago, back prior to the, sort of first redevelopment, we had a city park that took up a good chunk of our downtown area. In the 60s, that land was sold to a developer to build Cinderella City Mall, which was at the time the largest mall west of the Mississippi, I think. And that became the center of Englewood, the Cinderella City Mall, as I'm sure you could predict. Uh, over the decades following the 60s, the mall peaked and then declined. And in the 90s, there was essentially another redevelopment. Cinderella City Mall was demolished. We built our civic center, which includes our city hall and our library on that same site. And we also built a lot of parking lots for a lot of chain stores in that area as well. And ever since, we've been, disappointed in, in the most important, most central part of our city being a sea of surface parking lots. And so now, another 25 years after that second redevelopment, we are on the cusp of a third redevelopment. And it's a great opportunity. And it's something that Vibrant Englewood and our members are really engaged with, taking every opportunity to go to open houses, to sit on focus groups, to, talk to the developers and talk to city staff and, to really push for the future of our city center to look very different from its past. And we really do want a place that, I mean, quite frankly, the word that comes up most often, and this is not just from Vibrant Englewood, this is what, we see in city surveys and other things, is walkable. People want that area to be a walkable downtown. And right now, everything is so separated by parking lots that I mean, it's walkable in the sense of you could physically walk from one place to another, but you wouldn't want to
Yeah.
uh, because you're just walking over, hot asphalt. And so, we want an area that provides the kind of amenities that, serve the community. We want new housing, ideally both for sale housing and rental housing, would definitely be great aspect to have there. We want smaller local businesses as opposed to big box stores. And most importantly, we want things built on a human scale. We want things built so that, the people who live here can move between these places without having to get in their car. And that's, the opportunity that we have right now and we're fighting for.
Yeah, I think of all ages and abilities, like age 8 to age 80. If those people can't comfortably go to the grocery store or pick up coffee, like, it's obviously not a walkable community downtown. It's just surrounded by cars and maybe stroads, and I see some very, very wide roads here, and I'm sure you do too, where it's like 80 feet from one side of the street to the other side of the street, and that's not gonna build your vibrant community, your walkable, dense where people want to walk around and spend their money and hang out with their friends. They're probably going to have to get in their car and not have the accessibility to just stop and get into a store as they would walking.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the challenges with the way that Englewood is currently built is that our city is essentially divided into essentially quadrants by some roads. And some of the major streets are designated as state highways. And so, control and maintenance of those streets is managed by the Colorado Department of Transportation. And that makes it extremely difficult to get anything done as far as improving safety because the Colorado Department of Transportation is entirely focused on speed and throughput and, safety and multimodal access and access for all ages and abilities is just not on their radar. And then we have Broadway, which I mentioned previously, which is our main sort of north-south thoroughfare that, is to a large degree used for folks to pass through the city. And that is a street that is a city maintained street. So we do have the opportunity to make some changes. I recently sat on a focus group on safe streets on Broadway, and we sat through three-hour focus group meetings where we ranked and prioritized and provided input for the city and came out with a set of changes we wanted to see made. That got handed over to the traffic engineers, and then it came back to city council with a bunch of excuses for why they couldn't essentially do any of the things that we asked for. Lowering speed limits. There is our historic downtown is on Broadway, and it is an area where the buildings are built close to the street. Uh, the we have a currently a flashing beacon crosswalk that's going to be changed to a hawk signal soon. It really is the most sort of walkable part of our city. And the speed limit there goes down to 25 for like 2 blocks. And we're asking for that to continue, to just have the speed limit for Broadway be 25 throughout so that, we can slow traffic down. We can support our small businesses. We can create more comfort for people getting around by other means. And we were told no. And we asked for, the ability to permit parklets in front of businesses so they could take some parking to expand and activate the street. We were told no because the cars drive too fast. And so parklets aren't recommended. But also, we can't lower the speed limit. Uh, so it was really frustrating experience and something that we're definitely going to continue to push on, and I think it's it's an ongoing challenge figuring out how we get from the stroads that we have to the activated, vibrant, lively streets that we want for our community.
Thank you for doing all that work and advocating for the citizens of Englewood, but it does sound very, very frustrating. Like they just caught themselves in their own excuses, but they're still not going to do anything about it.
At least not now.
Okay.
Uh, we they did there's some other work being done on Broadway, which is positive, adding some bump outs at a number of intersections to accommodate larger sheltered bus stops, which is not something we've had on that stretch before. So it should be great for transit users. And hopefully we'll have some traffic calming effect as well. And they have committed to essentially redoing the traffic study after that work is done, trying to see if any of the situation changes that would potentially make it feasible to implement any of the recommendations that the focus group asked for. So, we're going to keep pushing, and we're going to keep an eye on it and certainly hold the city accountable. We're going through a strategic plan process right now, and you know, uh, have a seat at the table, continuing to push on the city to include our priorities as part of the strategic plan, and to make sure the strategic plan has specific measurable outcomes and not just a laundry list of all the things the city needs to do. And so there's a lot of channels to do this work, and we're trying to find as many of them as we can, and we're not going to stop anytime soon. So we'll keep pushing.
If you're enjoying the show, leave a rating or a like. It's a small gesture that goes a long way in helping other urbanists find the show. Now back to the show. When were your mayoral elections?
Yeah, so we had our first mayoral election in a few decades this last fall in November. So for the past 40, 50 years, we've had a system here in Englewood where the mayor was selected from among the city council members. So we have four city council districts. We had three at-large members of council that covered the entire city. And then once those seven folks were elected, they chose a mayor for a 2-year term from among themselves, and then sort of cycled, and different members of council became mayor. We had a ballot measure that passed a couple years ago to directly elect the mayor, and one of those at-large seats became the mayor's seat, and so we had our first mayoral election in the fall. And Vibrant Englewood is a 501c4 organization, not a 501c3. And we set up that way very intentionally because we knew that, especially in a city as small as Englewood, being able to advocate for candidates and being able to influence, who is on our city council is, as important, if not more important, than influencing the people that are already on council. And so, we were active in endorsing candidates and, turning out the vote in our local elections.
Very cool. And I imagine in a much smaller town, like every vote matters. One vote matters a lot more in a much smaller city than a city of a million people.
Yeah, exactly. I think it really is possible for a group like ours with a small volunteer base to go door to door and talk to our neighbors and do enough that actually makes a difference in our election. So, it felt like it was work that was really worthwhile, and we've gotten really good feedback. We don't have a printed local newspaper anymore. Our sort of community paper recently went to online only. And even then, it's, essentially one reporter works, locally. We get covered by the big TV stations in Denver occasionally, but not regularly. And so there's not a lot of sources of information about our candidates and about the policies that they want to pursue and what their priorities and values are. And so we put together a voter guide in the fall, explaining the candidates that we supported and why we supported them. And we got really good feedback on that. We heard from a lot of people that they felt like that was one of the only sources of information out there about their local candidates and local elections. And so we really feel like it was a positive thing to do, and made a difference.
Very towards the end of most of my episodes, I like to ask what kind of books have you read recently that you would recommend people pick up and read?
Yeah, absolutely. I do read a lot. I read 50 plus books a year, but mostly sci-fi and fantasy stuff. So,
Okay.
maybe not
Okay.
totally on point. Reading is my escapist activity. I think a lot of the ones that I would recommend, I've heard recommended on your show before. City Limits about Texas highways is a great book. I'm trying to think of some others kind of in this space that I really appreciate. I I want to recommend a book to folks that is a little bit outside of the focus area of this podcast, but I
Yeah.
think is really instructive about kind of how government works at a big picture level. It's called Recoding America by Jen Palka.
Okay.
And that book, so she's the founder of the US Digital Service, which unfortunately no longer exists under the current administration. But she was essentially instrumental under the Obama administration in sort of redirecting federal government technology to a more modern approach. And, I think there's a lot about that book that we as advocates can learn about the way that the divide between our legislators, whether it's Congress or whether it's our local city council, and then the people that do the work on the ground, whether it's federal employees, state employees, local employees, how each side thinks about their role in the process and how sometimes, the disconnect in communication and intention can really cause things to break down even with the best of intentions. So I'm going to recommend that book again. I know it's outside of sort of the particular space because it does focus on technology and government in particular. But I think it's really instructive. And I think it's definitely one of the best nonfiction books that I've read in the last few years. And so I think I'll go with that one.
Okay. Great. I've definitely had some unique recommendations before. I even got a nonfiction book. I got some Agatha Christie one time. I'm sure in like Project Hail Mary, there's some kind of urbanist agenda somewhere in there. I don't know. Let's stretch.
Well, certainly, at least it's been a little while since I read the book and I haven't seen
Okay.
the movie yet, but it, at least starts with a little bit of a vision of where we might be headed if we don't, worry about things like climate
Yeah.
change and, some of the other problems we're facing now. So hopefully we can, move down the field effectively a little at a time and we won't need a Hail Mary.
No. Or a Martian or wait, what's on my bookshelf? Anyway, where can people find you online or where can people find you in person?
Yeah. So our website is vibrantenglewood.org. As far as social media, we're mostly active on Instagram. Our handle is Vibrant Englewood. Also active on Reddit, but mostly in the local context. As far as the subreddits where you can find us. And then, in person, I'm here in Englewood, Colorado. Like I said, it's a great place to essentially live your life and not have to leave very often to do stuff. We really are. It's a great tight knit community, and I find myself out in the community on a regular basis. Whether it's having coffee, whether it's going to my kids' school events, whether it's going to city hall and city council meetings. And so, if you're in the Englewood, Colorado area, then and you're civically involved, you're probably gonna meet me out there. But of course, anybody who comes to the area, feel free to reach out and happy to connect.
Yeah, how often do you have your coffee chats?
Yeah, so from the beginning, we've been doing weekday morning coffee meetings every 2 weeks. We've recently switched to a model where we're doing coffee on one morning and then 2 weeks later we do a happy hour meeting. And we just heard from a number of people that they wanted to get involved, they wanted to come to one of our meetings, but weekday mornings didn't work for them, which is fair. uh, Certainly a self-selected group when you have that meeting time. So yeah, we've seen really good turnout for the happy hour meetings with a different batch of faces. And so really excited to open the door to some new people that want to be involved. So we are doing now, you know, 2 weeks coffee, 2 weeks happy hour, alternating between those, and then various events and other things to bring our community together as often as we can.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. Thanks for all the work that you're doing in Englewood and in the Colorado area.
Thank you, Jacob. It was really great to talk to you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the work that you're doing with this podcast. I continue to learn new things and get connected with, interesting ideas from the folks that you talk to. So thanks for what you're doing and thanks for having me.
Over the coming weeks, we will continue to explore the people and projects that are putting our cities in motion. You can follow Cities in Motion on Instagram for behind the scenes content and updates for the show. I'm Jacob, and thanks for listening. And we'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to keep your cities in motion.